At the end of the day, this is for you and about you, and you have to be the one to sit with the decision at the end of the day. What's up guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Bex, BX, and in this week's video, we are still on the law school application train. In this week's video, we're gonna be talking about how I decided on where I'm gonna attend law school this fall. This was a very interesting process. It was stressful at times when it really came down to deciding my official decision. I wanted to share just kind of how that process went down and what some of the things were that I used to help me decide where I'm gonna go. So what I'll say about the beginning of the process, really just kind of took it one acceptance at a time, or one decision at a time, we'll say, because not every decision was an acceptance. I just decided that I was gonna wait for a majority of them to come in first before I really started to make any moves. What I mean by that is that I did not want to get ahead of myself after just receiving one acceptance and then just decide like, okay, maybe I'll just maybe I'll just tell this school that this is where I'm going to go because I'm not sure if I'm going to get into any other schools. As I have spoken about in my previous videos, I was a little bit insecure about my prospects of getting into law school because of my LSAT. So I was really just grateful every single time I received an acceptance, every time I received a waitlist status. Like every time that happened, I was super grateful because I genuinely was not expecting to be accepted anywhere, which sounds so dramatic, right? Like now that I think back on it and know what I know now, it is a very dramatic attitude, but I was like, I need to remain humble because I know what my statistics are, and my LSAT really just kind of is a handicap to me. I just was hoping that I would get into a school, period. So at the beginning of April, a majority of the places that I had applied to, I had received my decisions from. So this is when I was like, okay, now it's actually time to start making some moves, start making some decisions, or at least now is the time to start planning some stuff. So now I'll talk about how I even did that, like how I compared schools in general. I had 3 categories for which I personally felt were important to me, things that I was concerned about that were gonna help me make my decision of where I was going to attend law school. The first category was cost. The second category that I felt was important to me was rank. And then my third category that I was concerned about was location. I'm gonna get into each category and what I did to help me decide within those categories right now. In terms of cost, what I found to be my best friend, my very best friend, was Excel. Excel is good because it helps you. I basically just made a spreadsheet with all the schools that I had applied to. And in this clip, in this picture, you're not going to see all the schools that I applied to because I started deleting schools after I decided like I didn't want to go there or I got rejected from that place. So this is only going to be the 4 schools that I was kind of looking at towards the end of the application cycle, with columns for rank, the school's tuition without scholarship, how much scholarship the school was going to be giving me, if at all, what their room and board cost was, what my debt would be, what kind of debt I would be incurring after graduation, whether I got accepted, waitlisted, or rejected at that school, and how much it was going to cost per year for me. I would constantly be referring back to this sheet from April till the end of May when I was trying to figure out and compare the schools so that I could kind of figure out, how am I feeling about this school? What are the numbers look like for that school? I had my dad in on it so that we could kind of compare things together and he could help me figure out where are these numbers coming from? Am I doing these calculations right? Knowing how to use Excel is a great skill, and I think that it's something that you should be learning how to use as you get older because it just is the easiest way to consolidate a lot of information at once and to do calculations that you don't want to be doing by hand. If you don't know how to use Excel, learn how to use Excel and then use it during your application cycle, because it's going to really help you just put everything down in one area and something to always be cross-referencing. Another website that I used that kind of helped me understand the cost of my legal education a little bit better and help me compare the schools better was accesslex.org. People use this to kind of help budget their legal education because it has a lot of information on there and it does a lot of calculating for you. So basically all you have to do is put in the school that you're going to, and it already has that school's cost of attendance there in the system. So all you have to do is put in the amount of scholarship if you're receiving any from that school. And what it does, it helps you figure out debt repayment plans, like how long it will take you to pay off that debt if given the amount of money. So you can put in yourself how much money you think you'd be willing to pay per month to go towards paying off your debt. And it'll tell you like, okay, given that, this is how long it should take you to repay this. Or maybe you can it's just an easy way to kind of adjust the numbers and look at things a little bit more clearly. And maybe there are some numbers in there that you didn't even think to add up. So it just helps you, again, another way of just consolidating a lot of information into one place, because this process is already very stressful, a lot of numbers, a lot of information that you're trying to process and compare in your head. So finding things that can make your life easier is very important and make your decision making process a lot easier. So the second category was rank. To make my decisions about rank, I talked to people. I knew a couple people at one of the schools that I was applying to, but for the most part, I didn't know that many people. But what I did was I talked to older people to kind of get their opinion on how much they think that I should be weighing in the ranking of the school and whether or not it's going to actually make an impact on my job prospects in the future. I felt like seasoned lawyers would give me good advice because they kind of know the game already and they've seen people come in and out, and they could kind of give me a gauge on whether or not having, come from a higher ranked school will actually give them a better chance at a job. To get a better understanding of what life was like at the different ranked schools, I talked to people who I knew were already at that school. I was mainly able to do this at GW, people that I personally knew. I know a rising 2L and a rising 3L, and so I wanted to get a feel on what it was like to go to a school that was within the top 25. I wanted to know about the competition. I just wanted to know what the atmosphere was like at higher ranked schools versus maybe slightly lower ranked schools. For the schools where I didn't know anybody, I went on to LinkedIn, and it actually ended up being pretty successful for me to be able to talk to people who are either fresh out of that law school or are still in the law school, to kind of talk to them about what they felt about that school, whether or not they think rank played a role in their ability to get internships or jobs after graduation. A way that you can do this is by going to law firms within the area of the school that you're interested in, or even just a law firm in general. If you're one of those people who kind of already know where you plan to work at, you can look those law firms up on LinkedIn, and then you can look up and see if there are any alumni of your school. You can kind of seek out people, contact them, say, hey, I'm going to this law school. I see that you graduated from here, or I see that you're still there and you're interning at this company, and I kind of want to talk to you about your experience and how you feel like it prepared you to have the internship or the job that you have now. It's kind of, you kind of have to put yourself out there on LinkedIn, and it can be weird a little bit at first, but that's the whole purpose of the website. So once I kind of got over that whole awkwardness thing, it was much easier for me to kind of contact people and see what information that I could get, because people know that that's what law students are using LinkedIn for, and they're okay with that. They don't mind connecting with you. You might not always get a response, so don't be offended. People don't always check their LinkedIn messages. There are the few that do go on LinkedIn and are active on there and are totally willing to talk to you about their experience. Some other websites that I was using in terms of comparing the schools when it came to employment statistics was LST report, so Law School Transparency. This is really good. It's another website that kind of consolidates all its information into one and allows you to kind of adjust things as you go. You can compare multiple schools at once, and it's mainly good for comparing employment statistics. So federal clerkships, big law, little law, medium law, public interest, jobs. It helps you compare the statistics of each school. I did not go on these websites as often as maybe some other people would if they were super concerned about big law possibilities or federal clerkship opportunities. If that's a criterion for you, then definitely use LST Reports because it makes it super easy for you to compare schools head to head. Another website that's very similar to LST Reports, not so much heavy on the employment part, but just comparing schools head to head, is lawschoolnumbers.com. This is also the website that I was talking about in a previous video. I think it might have been my last video. This is the website where law school applicants would put in their LSAT, their GPA, and the school that they applied to, when they applied, and whether they got accepted, rejected, or waitlisted, or if they're still waiting on a decision. That is the website if you guys wanted to check that out. I'm gonna link everything in the description bar below to make it easier for you to access all of these websites, but that was another one that I used. Not super frequently, at least in my decision-making process. I used it during the application cycle because I kind of wanted to see, when I was still waiting on decisions, I wanted to see where people were applying to and whether or not they got accepted, and I wanted to see what their stats were. Once I had kind of moved on beyond that, and I had gotten a majority of my admissions decisions, I was not on that website as much, but it's still a good website to check out some things like employment numbers, demographics of the school, and acceptance statistics. So when it came down to making decisions on location, I was looking at the cost of living at the places that I had applied to. I wanted to go to a school in an area that was either city-like or just urban in general. Of course, that's gonna mean a higher cost of living, but not necessarily. For example, I applied to GW, George Mason, and Georgetown in this area because I live here, and so I would not have to pay for room and board. So I could still go to school and live in an urban city area without the super crazy cost. Then I had to compare the cost of living in a city like Atlanta if I went to Emory, or living in a city like LA if I went to USC. That was kind of scary because living in LA, the cost of living is super high. Atlanta was not as bad. I mean, I knew in the back of my mind that LA is an expensive place to live. When I applied to USC, I just wasn't really thinking about that. Like, I just have this like ideal picture in my head of living in California. And then when it really came down to it and I had to look at the numbers, I was like, good God, living in LA is highway robbery. It was definitely a realization that I had to have, because I can't just make this crazy financial decision and not truly take everything into account. If I lived in LA, I would have to take out more loans just for room and board, not even just for tuition, but room and board. And that wasn't necessarily something that I feel comfortable doing at this point in my life right now. Schools put their cost of living on their websites. So all you have to do is look through financial aid, and they'll probably give you a breakdown. Some schools like Emory, they even gave me a breakdown in different levels based on the type of lifestyle that you see yourself living. So if you're older, maybe you can afford a more expensive lifestyle because you might have more saved up, or whatever might be the case. So you could probably afford a higher rent or whatever, and they'll give you a cost of living or even whole cost of attendance based on the different levels depending on where you are in your life and what you feel comfortable with. It is really helpful to look at these things because you forget about when you move that you're gonna have to consider things like rent, gas, utilities, parking if you're gonna need a car, which in LA you would absolutely need a car. Even in Atlanta, I'm absolutely gonna need a car. After all of that, that was basically what I was doing all of April and then into the beginning of May, was just looking at all the things, waiting for more admission decisions to come in. I got waitlisted at Georgetown, waitlisted at USC. At that point, I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna bring it down to the final two. The two that made it to the final round was GW and Emory. I was initially waitlisted at GW, so I was pretty dead set on going to Emory. Then I get off the waitlist at GW, which, thank you, Lord, but they were not offering as much scholarship. So I was like, hey, thank you so much, I'm honored, but I think I'm gonna go to Emory because Emory's offering me more scholarship, and it would actually cost me more to go to school even in the area that I live in than it would have been for me to move to Atlanta and go to Emory. And they were like, oh, there actually are some funds. Of course, they always find some magical money somewhere, and they're like, we can actually up your scholarship it ended up being that Emory and GW were going to cost the same amount. So grateful I was even making this decision, but it was a little bit stressful because I felt comfortable with going to Emory. Then all of a sudden, here comes GW, and it's like, I would like to see it. So this was what it was. GW meant living at home, equal cost to Emory. Technically, it was not equal scholarship. It was still less scholarship than Emory, but because I'm not paying for room and board, it's the equal cost. So I would still be incurring the same amount of debt, even though it's technically less scholarship. I would have the opportunity to have internships in DC beyond just doing them in the summer, because I'm in DC, going to school and living in DC. So I would be able to have these internship opportunities during the school year that other kids who have to travel to DC in the summer wouldn't have. And then I would also be going to school with people that I knew. So like I mentioned, I know a Rising 2L and a Rising 3L at GW. And part of that kind of was like enticing because it felt like I could maybe make friends easier, or at least navigate the school a little bit, like just navigate law school with some help, you know, people to help me with figuring out how to outline and just how to study for exams and all that type of stuff. I just felt like maybe it would be nice to know some people. So that was GW. Emory meant having to move to a whole new city, which I was fine with, equal cost to GW, living on my own, opportunity to work in one of the fastest developing markets in the country. I mean, Atlanta has I think one of the highest numbers of headquarters of major companies in the city. So I was like, this, if I was, again, like I said, I still don't know, but if I was interested in big law, Atlanta would be a really great place to start that big law career. Last but not least, a warmer climate. And if you all do not know, I went to undergrad in upstate New York. And those 4 years, I told myself after graduation, I will never live in a climate so cold as Syracuse, New York, ever again in my life. So as you can see, beyond, you know, the climate issue, the two schools are very, very similar to each other. The one and only difference of the two schools was that GW is ranked 23rd and Emory is ranked 24th. So do you see my dilemma? I was like, you know what? I feel comfortable. I'm gonna go to Emory. They're giving me good scholarship. It's a good school. I still made my goal of going to a school in the top 25, and life is good. It ended up not being that easy, as life goes. And so, this is what taking adulthood one day at a time truly means, is that you just never know what's going to happen the next day. You think everything is set, and then boom, another opportunity comes knocking. I would have been a fool not to consider the two options. I would have been a fool not to consider going to GW just because I didn't want to have to go through the process of comparing again. So what I did was I just prayed, and I just went with my gut and went with what I felt was right. And that was Emory Law. And I'm very excited. I'm going to be moving to Atlanta later this month. I mainly decided this because I've always loved living in a new place. I genuinely felt like it's now is the time for me to just leave home. I just need to get out. You know, it's time for me to learn what living on my own is like. It's time for me to really take this adulthood thing seriously. Like I said, I'm financing my own legal education. I'm really starting to do things on my own, and I just felt like Atlanta would be a great place for me to just start my adult life. It is still an urban city without being so overwhelming like LA or New York City. And I just think it's a good place for me to kind of start at the age of 23 so that I can, you know, figure this thing out, figure out what type of lawyer I want to be, and start my career. Also, when I was talking about rank, I really did not feel that going down one in rank, instead of going to the 23rd school in the country, going to the 24th school, I did not truly think